blanket, so it's more aesthetic.
Good.
Yeah, good. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first hosted meetup.
My first hosted meetup.
I don't know. Got to get all the weird stuff out of the way at first, like the nervous
Yeah.
ticks, verbal ticks that happen. Then we'll be hold hands at this after like 3 times.
How long we've been doing this for?
I don't know.
I
2
looked
months?
it up last time. 3 months maybe? No.
Yeah.
Definitely more than 2 months now.
Yeah, February, March, and then into April now, I think. Yeah. A bit of time.
And why did we start doing this?
Why? I don't know. Why did we start doing this? I think that
Yeah.
Farzad wanted help sort of batting around the business like stuff that he was juggling, and then Dave was like, it's a lot. I want to bring you in. He asked me because it's juggling a lot of balls. So like how do you keep them all straight? And I was like,
yeah.
I'm usually good with this kind of thing, or I can at least help maybe map where things are going, and then we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Basically, we've been doing this weekly for the past 3 months, where 3 of us sit and talk about everything that is basically on our minds.
Mm-hmm.
Work related, life related, and just sharing experiences, thoughts.
Yeah, and the style matters like a lot. This is actually one of the things I've been thinking about in the lead up to recording this, or recording in general. Yeah, I think that it might set the tone a little. Like it. So, I've had it like Clubhouse has shown up now, and like it's another platform that is broadcast centric. It's more participatory. It's more conversational, right? Which is nice, but you still have people leading the conversation and then like bringing people on stage, and there's a hierarchy involved, and
Sure.
there's status implicit in that, and it's good for a certain type of information exchange, but for the type of thing that I'm interested in, I'm not, like Twitter, all of these things, like yelling out to a bunch of people and then collecting followers. Good for you. I mean, I need to see more of the pros of this, but currently there's a lot of cons everywhere. So, and I've had friends like sort of encourage me to come and speak on these things and like build audiences and stuff. And I've been thinking more, I don't want an audience. I'm not interested in audience at all. I'm interested in peers, in collaborators, in people who are willing to communicate in good faith, to try, not argue, not, fight, not any of these things, but to sort of play together in a way. And so play doesn't mean that you're just goofing around. Like it means that you're bringing things up that might be meaty in a vulnerable environment that you may not understand, and then you can trust the people around you to reflect back to you in a way that keeps the thing moving, that helps us grow together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the environment that I want to play in, and I think that sharing the fruits of that environment is a necessary part of the practice, like putting it out so that other people can participate, like, at a different time, and then maybe that opens them up to do the same thing, or they reach out to us or something like this. This is the generalized goal, such as it is, like, and personal practice for me. But yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. I think that
Totally.
I think it's interesting too. Like we started with this sort of like Farzad, not that Farzad needs help, but Farzad's looking for extra brain power to think about something.
Yeah.
And it evolved pretty quickly into, in order to help Farzad think about something, we all need to bring our whole like self to the table and sort of spin up other related experiences or anything that's like Yeah, like the lateral movement. Like, oh, so like the way that Farzad's approaching one thing in business suddenly turns into like someone talking about childhood experiences or familial like relationships currently. Like, so it there's a way of helping each other with specific areas that sort of it starts growing into this bigger amorphous thing that the group can hold, which
Yeah.
is cool. And yeah, I like the recording, and I'm curious because I'm curious about it just personally and for my own, like, not selfish, but my own personal growth. What does it look like to come back to this
Yeah.
as me? And
Mm.
how often will I do that? I don't know, but I'm curious. Like, I've never really had a practice of recording myself and then listening back. I've had practice of writing to myself and reading it back, and that's extremely fruitful. So this is sort of like a different take on that, I think, in a way.
You did that regularly? I mean, I've sometimes stumbled across some of the notes that I did in the past. Reading them kind of surprises you how you actually thought and you didn't give yourself that credit in the
Oh
past.
yeah.
Wasn't that knowledgeable back then, but you were.
Yeah.
Did you have a regular habit of doing it? Go back to your previous notes and reading them?
Not formal, but I like to flip back. Like, I find myself called to it. I actually, in the software that I use for just daily note taking, Room Research, I just picked up that someone created a little plugin that it will randomly surface up, like they're called blocks. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And this is something like Dave and I have played around with before in the software that we were building with Ponder. If you
Yeah.
could put your notes into a system, have them kind of atomized into like little like blocks, and then have this sort of game, we called it magic mode, this like magic of have it send it back to you. And then you can decide like, okay, and I was playing with this. So I like put the plug in, like added it in, and then seeing which thoughts like from the past, and like you can kind of filter them. Only show me things from my journal, only show me things from this kind of note. Yeah, it's interesting because some of what comes back, like you said, Farzad, you're like, whoa, I was thinking about this back then, or it like that's like the same way I'm thinking about it now, or it's like totally different, and you're just like, I can't believe I was thinking about it like that. I've had the experience with handwritten journals, and I'm curious if I've kept some of them from when I was younger. I will read things and I can like transport back to where I was at the time, and it's like it flips me out. I'm like, whoa, this is so weird. So I'm like going back in time in a way, but with my current like mindset and knowledge. And so I guess that's what reflection is. You get to go back to like a prior version of self and look at it with new self. I don't know. I think it's fun, but I don't have a formal practice. Like, I
Well,
don't
I
sit,
guess,
and schedule it.
yeah. I guess this is exactly why we are doing this.
Yeah.
And also getting over the fear of complete transparency is never a bad thing, or that at least something that we are trying to practice here. Me personally, my goal with this is just getting over this thought of if I'm sharing too much, this probably gonna hurt me in the future.
Hmm.
In some meetings, in some work related stuff, this
Yeah.
kind of hold me back. But I think the benefits of actually sharing your thoughts completely transparently without filtering, um, there are more good in it than any bad,
Sure.
Yeah. I
hopefully.
think that it's interesting. Well, two things. Like, so as part of like the moving process, we're nomadic, Kristen and I right now, as a, sort of, we're moving around the country, and we just left Oakland where we were in a house for a few years. And I've been carting around like boxes of stuff from place to place. And one of those boxes has all my old like sketch pads, and the way I would do like product design and all my thinking and stuff is on these large pads. And they were mostly just a working, like surface to work out like visual representations of like thinking and stuff. And I never really went back to look at them, like,
Mm.
but I kept them all. And I developed a sort of fear of what was in them.
Hmm,
Like they had a potency because
interesting.
that exact thing you said, like you know, at the time I was so insecure about the stuff that I'm writing, or overly secure, overly certain, and you know, so lots of emotional waves. And in the process of putting our possessions in storage to get mobile, we needed to winnow down like a lot of the stuff we have, because we don't, you know, getting lighter is a part of, you know, like sort of letting things go. And this is a pretty emotional process. And I got to this box and I was so scared to open it up. Uh, and then I pop it open, like, and I sort of set aside time. And like, I was in my office by myself, like pacing around and like flipping out. And then like, I start looking through these things, and the coherence of thought and like clarity of thought from me like 20 years ago, like if I was able to have that conversation with myself ongoing, right, if I were looking at these things, it would have compounded, I'm pretty sure. And it was compounding, it just, I wasn't reflecting on any of it. And there are ideas in there that like I'm still repeating because they never expressed. And then I found all these drawings and stuff that I would do like as a side practice, and I'm like, this stuff is not bad. Like, and
Oh
and
yeah.
the part of this was like sort of coming to terms with like my younger self, and there was a sort of healing in this. I'm like, oh, you're doing all right, and like I'm proud of former you or whatever. So it was a good, like it was a good healing practice, and then resilience practice. Like I do it pretty, I mean, I write every morning now. Like it's the first thing I do in the morning. And then I've been drawing. Well, I need to pick that up again. Uh, Drawing like while going through these processes like is pretty helpful, like a just loose journal drawing, not like making anything specific, just letting it come through. And then
Mm.
there's a visual language in there that like you may understand, nobody else, but that's fine because you're having a conversation with the artistic side of yourself. That's what I found anyway, and that's proven like crazy fruitful. But yeah, this is
I
just
was
another media.
I was impressed by your earlier drawings. It was cool to see like this side of you that I haven't seen in your current work.
Yeah.
And that was like, I was surprised because it was less psychedelic than it is now. It was more, I mean, it's still kind of psychedelic in the sense of it's like a kind of warped like view of reality, but yeah, like almost more literal, I guess, which was
Yeah.
interesting to see. So there's been this evolution of, I don't, maybe you loosening up. But
A
there's
lot.
something, there's something that you said about you were like afraid to look back at your past self to see like how like that potentially there was this sort of like judgment of past
Oh
self,
yeah.
which is interesting to me. I don't know that I have that. Like I sort of delight in whatever I like that I went through the thing, even if it was really hard. Like I have this, like I some of my journals, because I've experienced depression and anxiety like pretty bad. And I go back through it and there's like this compassion for the past self. And
Yeah.
also I kind of laugh at it too, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, look at you just pouring it all out. Like, and it's because I'm not in that mindset now. I think that I've
Mm.
spent a lot of time working on mental health and understanding like where I'm coming from. But yeah, there's this weird, there's a relationship with the past self that I don't know that judgment ever entered. But then again, if I was coming at it with a depression or feeling anxious or like not really positive about myself, if I looked back at the old stuff, I guarantee that I would be looking at it thinking, oh, you haven't grown at all. Look at you. You're
Yeah.
just the same as you used to be. So yeah, I guess mood helps with how you're looking back. So it makes sense that you would take the time to sort of, okay, I'm gonna carve out time and space for me to go through this. And I remember you talked about wanting to do it, but you didn't do it right away. So you were sort of waiting for the right time.
Yeah, it was the sort of mentality of parenting sort of kicked in. Like so
Mm.
those journals are a representation of somebody younger, right? Or mentoring. Like what would I say to somebody who is that young who comes to me as a creative? Like as somebody who is trying to grow
Mhm.
themselves in practice and, you know, in their art and their craft and their business and whatever. And would they show me something? I'm like, this is fucking terrible. Like, that's terrible feedback, right?
Yeah.
And like, I would never do that to someone else, even at the time that I was creating these works, right? But I
Yeah.
was doing that to myself all the time, right? Um, and so my fear was that that personality, that style of parenting, that style of mentorship or whatever was still resident in there. And but the fear is something that you need to lean into. It's just, what is your stance with the fear? How are you going to approach it? If you go in full guns blazing, it'll fight back, right? But if you go in with like compassion and like the ability to hold the pain that was resident there, then it can loosen up and like and flourish, right? This is the same thing with raising kids, I imagine. I don't know, I don't have any, but you know, you can see it in the health of people that you run into, like were they given places to expand themselves and fail and screw up and do all these things and then come into alignment from that understanding. And we're doing, there's a fractal here, we're doing that with this practice. Like, can we create a space where we can say the craziest thing that we have ever come up with and it's fine, right? And then and then take a look at that thing. So yeah, the byproduct of that is like a sort of warming to the person that you were, a continuity through time that you, and then you can grow further through that continuity. So
I have notes. There was a phase. I've never been consistent with anything.
mm,
Um, Other than just the passion that I have for the work. That's the only
yeah.
thing that's actually consistent. Everything else just phases for me.
Mm,
But there was a period where I did notes before I went to bed consistently for a few months.
mm,
Those notes are now, I would say, 8 years old. The
mm,
fear I have of going and reading all of them
yeah.
is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And for me, it's more of a, um, I'm a very, I'm very certain of myself
Mhm.
Mm,
to a degree that it's sometimes overwhelming and sometimes underwhelming.
yeah.
So the decisions that I'm making are so, I don't know, like I had I think I read like 3 notes of them a year ago. And first one was like, wow, the confidence in some of the
Hmm.
decisions without actually knowing what's going to happen, because you are
Yeah.
foolish, especially when you're younger.
Yeah.
uh, you don't
Mhm.
understand the risk that you are taking. But I've always been very much, um, I don't know, not fearing the risk that I take, only because I just find life very, for the lack of better word, I guess, pointless. um, so for me, um, I never considered risks that much, but when I'm actually reading some of this stuff and decisions that I made, which drastically kind of changed my life a few times, um, I wonder what else I can find with the knowledge that I have today. And then some of them were obviously good. Some of them are really, really, not so good. Um, but that's the thing that I haven't yet accepted about myself, that I make decisions very, very quickly, and I stick
Yep.
to them for a long period of time, because I can't go back in some of those decisions.
Mm,
And the biggest fear in life for me, it's none of the obvious stuff. For me, it's just doing something I can't turn back to,
yeah.
or the what is it, the uh like Jeff Bezos says, there are two type of decisions, and the two-way and one-way.
Mm, don't know that.
Making the wrong decision on a one-way thing,
Mm,
Mhm.
and you just done, that's your life now.
yep.
That's my biggest fear in life. And that's the reason
Interesting.
I cannot go back to notes. Yeah, I'll find some of those. I'm leaving a few of them.
Sure.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I struggled with this so much. Still do. I mean, less so now. I think I've come to I'm more relaxed with this. Like it's finding a way to the things that are popping up here, like are So I went to therapy because one of my overblown confidence and doubt system was doing the same thing you're talking about. And there were times where I'm just like, this is the way, here we
Yeah.
go. And then
Mhm.
grabbing everybody and yanking them along with me and stuff. And sometimes that, when it worked out, I mean, it was miraculous, right? Um, and then a big part of it was like, get enough of those in your under your belt, and without any sort of system of reflection, you can start taking credit for what, like, you did this, you didn't, like, that doesn't work for me anymore. Like, an act in the world is a byproduct of all of these relationships you have and all of this stuff that's come before, and then all of your lineage, and the place you are in the world and the resources, and your clarity of thought, right, and your alignment with the world. And if you start taking credit for that thing, like that tended, this is the audience thing again, don't look at me, look at what's happening. Like, like, uh it can freeze you into that identity, right? Like, create a structure around something that is moving parts, right? Everything is in motion, nothing is firm. So I've been looking into a lot of the like, the Tao, and like sort of like Chinese medicine, and the philosophical, like, underpinnings of these things, and it's a lot about fluidity and movement and these things that I'm talking about, versus the sort of Western, model of like form that is locked into the world, right? And like, this is one of the things where identities get locked in this way. And like, but the truth is that we are all of these different personas and all of these different things talking to each other, right? And so if you can't like, if there is a blockage in persona there, you get these like buildups and fears and these kinds of things. And I've been experiencing. I mean, yesterday, we had to postpone this, and part of it, you asked me in text, like, am I canceling because I'm afraid of this? And I had to think about that. Like, I think ultimately no, but part of me, yeah, part of me that, like, there is a there is a releasing here, right? And I don't know what that's going to do to me. I don't know how that's going to change me. And but who is me? Me is the ego in this sense. Like, what am I afraid? There's nothing to be afraid of. Like, so anyways, I don't know. That's a whole bunch of crap in there. I'm
Well, there's a
sticking these
lot.
ideas together right now.
There's a theme about fear, and like
Mm,
for me personally, fear comes in with personal growth, because
mm,
I think we've talked about this before. So if you have to face the blockages or face your past self, maybe you made a mistake, maybe you didn't, whatever it is, there's something to be learned. And under, like, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, reflection, going back to look with what you know now, you could
mm,
see things differently, and that can be scary because you don't know what that information is, what you are going to learn, and you don't know how it's going to impact you. So it could like shatter like worldview potentially. I mean, in what we're talking about, maybe not, but there are some like examples of people. I don't know if I've had something like this where you go back and it's sort of like it was some like linchpin or keystone, and you see it differently, and then the whole thing falls apart. So
yeah,
i
yeah.
i think that's where the fear comes from. And if you have a support network, and practices and ways to maybe go about it, I think it's less scary. But it's interesting to think that your past self, like in Farzad's case, and it sounds like Dave as well, and like I took similar risks and stakes, but less with business and more just like decisions and like how I'm going to live my life. And um, I guess sometimes with career, but the relationship between taking risk and like creating these high stakes. So what Dave's saying, like, you did that for a reason. So why were you doing that? What was the
Yeah,
lesson you're teaching yourself? And
yeah.
I mean, this is just more of a question, like, what is the fear there? Why is there fear of understanding how you operate? And
Mm,
I don't know, feeling into that, because that's where, I mean, this gets into the personal growth stuff, like, because you don't
yeah, yeah.
know quite what you're gonna find. But that's sort of for me, like that's where I want to go immediately. I'm like, why? So you're taking risks and stakes and like make like the like ramping it up too. So what is it? So and this evolves. Like there's no real answer here.
You know, sometimes you believe in something, you're not really sure where it comes from,
Yeah.
and you can't really explain it, but you deeply believe it. Mine was I should put myself in the like the biggest troubles, not like on purpose. Like if I can see this would teach me a lot of stuff, I would
Yeah.
purposely put myself in that scenario and then live it.
Yep.
Yep.
Just because I think deep down there is just so much more to come out. So the only way to kind of speed up life is just going through so much difficulties as much as possible, especially during my 20s and then now 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But then now looking around, you see people, there are people that are very happy and very calm and they have a very good sense of, this is life. Why should I make it more difficult?
Yep.
Like success is nothing. And I don't think I did it because I thought it would probably get me to the next level or whatever. I just thought that was a very good way of reinventing myself all the time.
You were trying to learn, I think. You're
Yeah.
trying to figure it
But
out in a
in
way
a
that makes
very,
sense for you.
yeah, but in a very, very difficult way. Like it didn't have to be that way. And I still sometimes do it. And the only reason that I'm trying to get out of the things that I've started is that I see it sometimes. I'm still doing it. Like I don't need to do this. Any of the agency can grow really, really well if I don't put too many constraints on it. But I'm doing it just because I think, well, there is an opportunity here to come up with something. You don't have to. I can let that be, and it can be a very successful business on its own, but I'm putting constraints on it just to make it more difficult to see what happens. Just that experiment of it, just an idea of maybe something new comes out of it. But then it's so much easier to live with a very profitable business than putting it on risk all the time for maybe a reward later. But I'm all for that direction in my entire life. I would postpone things. I'm very long term. I'm incredibly long term, which is an issue. It's a nightmare because most of the things that I'm postponing for future that I'm thinking I have time. I'm in a comfortable stage. I'm in a comfortable place now. And I can leave this out a bit more to see if I push this just a little bit more, a little bit putting more constraints on top of it, I might come up with something entirely new. But then on the other hand, time is running. Let's say if tomorrow I get sick, I will regret this. And this is where I am. Like now we've been to places that not that I'm gonna say that they have COVID now, but chances are pretty high. Not pretty high, but but then
more than
you
zero.
start thinking more than zero for sure. But you start thinking,
is it a learned pattern? So what's the root of it? So if you keep recreating the high stakes, high risk, right? Where did it start? Like, did you learn somewhere along the way when you were younger that this is how life is, right? Because oftentimes I feel like this is where it's interesting. Sometimes listening to someone, it's like, well, is it that easy that it's just we keep living out the same patterns that we, like all of us as individuals, we learned when we were younger? I mean, it's not that simple, but sometimes you can go back and you're like, oh, well, maybe it is something that I learned when I was a kid and I'm just like sort of reinventing it over and over again because you're trying to learn some lesson that you're just trying to teach yourself. And sometimes you just can't see it.
It's always been very interesting to me, the things that you pick up. So even with twins, they don't pick up the same things, even though they are most things are shared. They're in the same room most of the time, but they don't hear the same thing and they don't pick up the same things. I have sentences in my brain and they stick hard. and they start to define me for whatever reason. I completely, as soon as I hear those words at that moment, I identify myself with that very sentence, and it becomes a core way of, this is me. This is so me. I should do this. Um, I have a couple of, but then, yeah. Um, I think mine, the only reason that I put myself in these troubles is just I noticed the change when I first moved out of a place that I was comfortable in. And then you suddenly see a shift in your personality and
Yeah.
how quickly that happens, because your entire surrounding, people around you, everything changed, and
Yeah.
in almost over a day and over a night. And from the next day you start behaving differently, because you are not kind of uh, that old person is completely gone. There's nothing that
Yeah.
keeps reminding you of that personality, so you develop a new one.
Mhm.
What a crazy idea. I can put myself in new places all the time and remove everything that is known to me around me, and surround myself with a bunch of new things, new people, new experiences, and I'm a different person now.
Yep.
And that's very
Interesting.
addictive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, this is part of what can happen there, and I've done it, is that is a hack. And if you can keep moving, you never have to look back. So,
Yeah.
like, and this is the fear, because if you're afraid, or I was afraid of like looking back on this stuff and finding my worst fears. And like what the truth of that stuff is, a lot of these fears are, for me, they were childhood things. They were things that I picked up as a kid and never grew up, right? They're like sort of, I'm working with this mental model of, being multiple people, right? In one person, right? And you are the culmination of a lot of personalities talking to each other, like working with each other. And some of those personalities are assholes, and some of them are really kind and too loving, and some of them are really creative and you can't keep them pinned down. But the balance of all of those things, like a good team, like requires like a relational process. And if your relational process is like really sort of like biblical and like firm and like you're bad, this kind of thing, like the Old Testament God, like you're gonna, versus like, okay, let's take a look at this and let's work it out, and these kinds of things. There needs to be room to work with these things, and this is where journaling has been helpful for that. Like those personalities, those phrases that you say that like bring you into a personality type, like if those phrases have personas attached to them, in my findings, and they have an entire language, and they can speak to each other. So if you write them down, you're in that mindset. All right, blah 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 blah, this is what this person has to say, and then it'll move into another persona. And they're pretty typical. Like my initial ones were the artist and the general, right? Like this is how I conceived of them. And then they want very different things. The artist wants to fucking goof around and like make things and go see the world and interact and love everything. And the general's like, fuck you, we work now because everything will kill us if we don't, right? And so both are true. And then there's a whole cast of other characters in there too, but those are the primaries. And once I got them talking, and like, and I'm doing it through creative writing and through drawing and all these other things, there's this loosening. They start working together, right? And in that working together, you get these energy releases and fucking crazy shit's happening. And then having these like sort of practices like qigong help me with this. And I'm figuring out why qigong is so important for my sort of general leaning tendencies, my military tendencies. It was developed during a time when China was like warring, and they needed these practices to work with the pain and like the philosophy of doing war appropriately, right? And like these, so the warrior persona that I have, this general, like wants to fucking obliterate everything, but that's not good war. Good war is surgical, it's
Yep.
precise, it's
Strategic.
loving, it's caring, it's doing the least amount of damage with like the necessity for violence, these kinds of things. And the artist needs to teach that, right? There is artistry in and craft and all this stuff to these things. So you can see I'm like starting to put together a sort of mental picture, and then I can it's my own like sort of philosophy. And if I'm coming out of alignment on these things, I can check, I can write it down, I can communicate with that. Then I can talk to you and then see if I'm operating based on this ethos that I'm trying to develop. So anyways, this is, yeah, first time I said that out loud.
I
What's
always
the
found it
point?
interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just always found it interesting that Dave has a very clear picture of all of the different, personas that he has, that
Kind
all
of.
of us have. Yeah, but you kind of, all right, this is the general, this isn't that.
Sure.
I have none.
I think you have these
Dave's
personas. I've just worked on, like, this was causing me so much pain, like having the constant war inside me, or, like I traced it back to the degree that I could. And this is where, like, doing some psychedelic work, doing some like work with different drugs, and then therapists and stuff like this, I was able to sort of map this territory, right? And it's these are analogies, they're metaphors, right? But they're
Yeah.
metaphors that work for me, right? In the same way that design systems are metaphors, right? So I'm just using my design training to and like marketing ability to be like, okay, well, this feels appropriate. And like, because the same thing works negatively, if it feels appropriate, you can act on it, right? But adding a level of consciousness to what's going on internally, like, what you start to notice is like, oh, if you're out of balance, this is what wisdom traditions do. They give you tooling that allows you to work with all of this stuff. It's the magical realm of things, the spiritual realm. And what's happened with, like, especially if you're working with technology all the time, technology does not like this stuff. It actively pushes it, it distracts you from this stuff, right? And so, one of my biggest goals here is to try and figure out a way to have it talk better with each other, the technology and the magic stuff. Anyways, I don't know. What were you saying, Kristen?
There's a few things. So the reinventing self based on location,
Mm,
moving around, like changing environment, that kind of thing. And like Dave, you've moved around a lot as a kid. Um, so there's some like learned behavior here probably. I didn't have this, so like I grew up in like one place and like two houses basically my whole like childhood, until I was like 18 and left the house kind of thing. But there's still, because I've had my own like pain and suffering, like I had depression, anxiety, and I always like I fantasized about running away all the time. Like I'm gonna get away. And I remember like I have like sketches or journals and things that like stuck in my mind, for whatever reason, probably because there was a lesson here. I didn't know what I was running from, but also like this is where drinking too much and using drugs to try to like avoid like something, like not knowing what it is, but it just keeps coming back. And then it's kind of like the thing where you can't keep running from whatever it is because it is you. And
yeah.
so the question is for everybody, what is the point in time when you stop running and you look at the thing? Like why do we do that? And then this is like, there's a phrase, when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, like when that differential exists, then
Yeah.
you'll change. But a ton of things have to line up where, like you're talking about, Dave, like a set of practices. It could be using psychedelics. And this is where the ecology of practices come in, where you have a lot of different things that sort of line up so that you can explore whatever this is in a lot of different facets. And I think that the collective aspect of it is so important, like having a
Yeah.
group, because we've talked a lot about this. So you can get at material or see things in a different way when you're with a group. You'll voice it, something that you would have never gotten to on your own. And I think the reason for that is we can see ourselves in other people, and it's more comfortable when you're like, oh, they're going through something similar and it looks different for me, but like there's immediately like this relief where I don't feel so like damaged or something like that. Like I mean, these are like sort of blunt words. I'm not bad. I'm not damaged. There's not something wrong with me because I see other people and they're doing the same thing. I still get this. Like I have little insecurities. I went for a walk last night without Dave because he wasn't feeling well. And I was immediately aware of like how self-conscious I am because when I'm with Dave, I sort of outsource a little bit of my safety to him. We're sharing like where there's two people instead of just one looking out for surroundings, and we're in a busy area. There's tons of people out. There's a lot of homeless people. It's not really dangerous, but like I need to be more aware. And then on top of that, there's this like I don't know what it is, where I'm aware of what I look like and how people are seeing me. And I get in my head where I'm like, I don't look like I belong here. People are looking at me funny. And I don't know why. Like, I'm like, where is this coming from? But I just keep walking because what am I going to do? I'm going to stop and go home because I'm scared. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, it's broad daylight. I'm going to see a sunset at a beach. There's a bunch of people out. People are happy. And I found myself looking at and like, how do you look at people when they walk by? Are you looking at them and judging them and like care, like I don't know who these people are? And I'm like, yeah, I am judging them, but only in such a way of like, oh, that person looks like where I think they might come from, or do they live here, or I wonder where they got that style from, or she's
Yeah.
really interesting. Like I've never, like there's no one else on this beach that looks like her. And then by the time you get to Pacific Beach and you're walking along the boardwalk, there are so many people and they're just coming at you and it feels good. And then all of a sudden you feel safe in numbers, like there's greater numbers. So this the collective thing that comes back, and there's all types of people and it's all okay. No one is judging you. Everyone is sort of celebrating all of the different like, so I think that's kind of an offshoot, but it relates somehow here where the collective can hold you and you can work through the insecurities by being around a bunch of other people who probably also have insecurities, but it's okay. Like you're just here. Like I made a note, I had a little notebook. People being people. That's just what the beach is. And it's great. It feels so exciting to me. I'm like, look at all these people. They're all like, everyone is doing something different. It's wild. Like I feel like I'm walking into a set or something, a set of what like life is. Like this is what humanity is. Here it is.
Yeah. We are just curious about each other's stories. That's all it is. That's why we're looking at each other.
Yeah, I mean, our impulse is to connect, to be with each other in relationship. I mean, that is the driving thing that makes humans, right? It's one of the driving things. So this is back to the technology can atomize that feeling, can separate us, and particularly things like money, right? Like
Yep.
the system of money in the United States, you can see it sort of printed out in the way people live. Like the less money you have, the more you got to be with people. The more money you have, the more you can be in a castle away from everybody, right? And this shows up throughout history over and over and over again, and there are miseries on both ends of that spectrum. So trying to be like, true freedom is being able to move in and amongst people openly, vulnerably, right? Being able to hear them, to see them, right? Without these fears. And but that takes work, that takes conditioning, that takes training, right? um, to look at somebody across from you who for whom you don't have a specific understanding because you may have not have like culturally grown up with them or have been around them, you don't understand their motives. Like moving around a lot as a kid, this was really difficult because you'd be dropped into a situation and all the rules are completely new, right? And you
Yeah.
have to like sort of orient. And if you're 10 or 9, the ability to make sense of that is only as good as the education you've had. And if your education is not meant to like appropriately condition you to the likelihood of danger in the world, like you can freak out a lot, and then that becomes like a way that you see the world all the time, and you've trained that, right? and years and years and years of this, it compounds. So like what I found in this same thing is like, I mean, we're going to come through this with COVID too. People are afraid of each other, like literally physically, because being close to each other it's toxic, it's deadly, right? So that gets into your muscles, it gets into your bones, right? And so the ability to relax around that and know that you are safe together is something that you have to practice, you know, and you have to practice it in yourself too. This is internal, your internal practices print out into the world as your external world. So, and this is where culture and society comes in, I think. So, I don't know. I've been noticing it a lot in myself in leaving Oakland, where we were very comfortable and everybody is safely distanced and everybody takes the rules extremely seriously. And then we go out into places like the beach and they're just like, fuck it, this is how it is. And I'm like, okay, that's what we're doing, I guess, around here. Is there
Oh, it's
danger
so
though?
relieving.
Yeah, it's relieving, and it's painful in a way because
Yeah,
you've become tightened,
it's
and
both.
when you release that tension, it's like when your leg falls asleep or you've been holding something too tightly. There is a way to do that gracefully, and
Yep.
you know, I'm not great at graceful.
Well,
I just let
it's
it go
still,
and then everything
there's a
hurts.
transition. There's always a transition.
Yeah,
Yep.
so being artful in transition, I think, is something that I'm learning by moving a lot right now. Like, okay, there's a way to to say goodbye to things. There's a way to embrace new things. Like, there's a gradient. It's not just binary. Like, you know, I'm here, now I'm here. That's not how the world works. There is transition, there is journey, there is
Yeah.
a, and
Mhm.
doing that is an artful practice.
Yeah, the money thing is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
With like insecurities and money and like status, like if someone's successful in like business. So like at first, oh, you got to come talk to Farzad. I'm like, what am I going to say to Farzad? This guy's doing like a million things, like, and I find myself like, oh, I don't know, like, can I talk with like, I know how to talk to people, like I have, and
Yeah.
Dave's helped me sort of. So I spent so much time in like nonprofit and like government funded work that you get you get comfortable with what you know, and then you think that, oh, it doesn't work outside of like these environments, which is not true. And there's kind of like a remembering, and I know this, like I'm pretty flexible. So even the practice of coming and spending time together, it's another reminder that we're not so different. We have very different expressions of what we are doing in the world, but there are ways of connecting with people, even though I have a completely different track record than you do, Farzai, when it comes to making businesses and what like area within business that you're focused in. And that's nice. Like that feels good. And it's starting to come up again with money because we're talking to some companies about potentially angel investing, and the self-consciousness comes in. Like, what if we don't have enough money? What if we're not aligned? What if you're not?
Yeah.
You talk to them, and it's not like, and if you're talking to people that are compassionate in a general sense of the word, it doesn't matter what the alignment is. And even if there is one, if you're talking to people who are not compassionate and don't really care about you, you don't want to do any kind of relationship business with them at all. So it's again and again this reminder, like, it's okay to come as you are. You should do that. Like, I have to remind myself that. Don't put on a face, don't try to guess what the person wants. Like, what do you like, why, like
Yep.
that sort of. Yeah. And the irony of all of this is that I don't think that I am putting on a face for people. I'm just really aware of the internal turmoil because I have a really hard time lying to myself. So it's not like I can like chameleon and be like what you want, whoever you is. But the instinct to be nervous about it, like I think that's what I'm working on. Like I want to like settle into that, like, because I would prefer not to have that every time I'm going into new situations. But maybe that's just part of, maybe it
Stage fright.
changes. Yeah, it changes like what your experience of that connection is when it's not known.
I've never acted as my current self.
Hmm.
Hmm,
It's a problem. And it's a good thing because I always act as my future self. I know
interesting.
the person that I'm going to become.
Hmm.
So whenever I'm talking to, with 3 jobs, it was like talking with clients, and clients slowly started to get bigger, budgets got bigger. Can we handle it? And with agencies, you get as much as they believe you are good for it. It's
Yep.
Yeah.
never about the time or the project or whatever. You can
Yep.
basically ask any number. And if they look at you and they never go look into the details of the thing, are you good for this? So that's the presentation that
Yeah.
does the entire business kind of relies on. So you learn to kind of present your future self, and that becomes
Interesting.
a way
Yep.
of
Yep.
communicating with people. But I also guess in the way of um, other type of kind of relationships that you want to build outside
Yep.
of the work, because you are
Yep.
constantly so busy with whatever it is that you want to become or accomplish in the future. But then there was this thing that the best luxury, the most luxurious thing is to walk into any room as yourself. And that made
Hmm.
an impression on me. That was like, that is probably the goal of most people,
Yeah.
just being yourself. And what a power that must be. You don't change your voice, you don't change the way you talk or behave or dress. Dress was a big thing. Like in the
Yeah. Yeah.
beginning, when you are getting
Yeah.
into some of these client meetings,
Hmm.
you do a background check and you're like, all right, I need to dress a little bit differently just so that I don't waste the first 20 minutes of them proving them wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just because you are in a certain way. And then slowly you understand that what a power it is to walk into any room. They get a little bit, surprised. That wasn't what I was expecting. You need to be all tied up. Um, but then as soon as you start talking, things loosen up and you feel a sense
Mhm.
of kind of pride in yourself, because
Yep. Yep.
there you go, you are expressing yourself exactly as you are, and you get that feedback. Hopefully the first few times, that's a positive feedback that just becomes a way that you act from then on. But yeah, I don't know why, but I always act as my future self.
I think it's good. It's so there is this in the same way that you can look back on your past self and take care of that person, you can do things in the present that your future self will approve of effectively or will thank you for, right? Like I think about this all the time. Like one of the first ways this showed up was like the fear of like publishing and putting things out and expressing and communicating with people, right? And there's a tendency in men that you will close down because maybe the expressive arts haven't been something that you've culturally learned or something like this, and that there's an inertia to that that's easy to follow, right? Like you just keep closing down, getting more and more isolated, not saying what's on your mind because you're afraid that it won't be taken well or all these other things. And at a certain point, like I like these little spells and these little I don't know, mantras and these kinds of things. The same thing that you were saying, like something pops into your head and then you can act on that. Like you can write your own, you can design your own. And one of the first things when I would encounter this thing, and I'm still not great at following it, but I'm better than I was, uh, is just like do things that will make old Dave laugh. Like do things that will make him happy to look at young Dave's ridiculousness or like ambition or courage or whatever it is. Like even if it's not right and it's you have no idea, but like did you take these chances and will there be a fondness in that looking upon? By like now I'm like no matter what I do now that is the case, right? Like but now can I do my future self proud? Am I in alignment with that future self? Like is the type of world that I wish to live in like bettered by the actions that I'm taking now? And will that future self have it a easier or worse time of having to deal with all of the things that the complexity of being older will require, right? And so you are tending, you are like stewarding your current self for the future version of yourself. Is this the way I've sort of got it worked out now? And this comes out in little mantras. Like right now, I've got this one that's like, every time I make a decision, I've been like doing this thing where I'm like, do the healthy thing, do the healthy thing, do the healthy thing. And I wrestle, that's my little wrestling match all the fucking, I lose that wrestling match constantly. It's just, but it's a sort of like, it's an orientation point, right? Like I know what the healthy thing is. And if I don't know, go figure it out. How do you figure out? In what way do you figure it out? Are you doing that compassionately? Or is the general showing up and kicking you in the fucking teeth to be healthier? Like it, so yeah, anyway, so there's this like sort of, there's this system that you can build like with yourself, and you can pull stuff off the shelf. There's the wisdom traditions have tons of these little things, prayers and rituals, and like, yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm struck again by there's similarities between the two of you that are super insightful for me because of your experience as basically lifetime entrepreneurs. And there's like an over honed ability to think about future self because you guys are always thinking towards the future. You're inventing things, right? You're bringing things into the world that don't exist yet. So that's really cool. Like you have a skill set in doing that for like, I reflect on it and I think that I've been more caught up in past self, like how like Dave and I get into this, like when I'm editing photos, I'm like, is this what it looked like? And he's like, it doesn't matter what it looked like, it's what it felt like. I get stuck in like, but what happened? What is the past? And I'm pointing behind me. It's like it's a thing. So, but you have, it seems like you guys have sort of the opposite where it's like, well, the future is a thing and we're driving towards this. And like it's useful though, like you're saying, Farzad, like I'm never the current self, I'm the future self because I'm living this like business mindset. So there's some sort of temporal thing where people are learning to like fall into alignment across the spectrum of time with self, and you have to do that if you want to be well-rounded, so you can walk into a room and it doesn't matter what people think of you because you're not even thinking about that anymore.
Nope.
But
you're just reacting.
there's a lot of work here to do, I think, for everyone, but
part of the fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun when you can do it with other people and you're not sitting like by yourself being like, what is going on? Which I spent a lot of my life doing.
But it's a comforting thing because I have a very strong belief that I'll figure this out. So my future self is all set. Yeah. So if I'm acting currently as that person, I have no problems currently. That's what I keep telling myself. That's the comfort in kind of seeing yourself as a future self. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Like so each of these systems is going to work to the degree that it works for you, right? And like your view on the world. And so what I've noticed though in these is that like the systems have to be updatable based on complexity. So depending on the number of plates that you're spinning and the number of people that you're influencing, right? Like you may be looking after more than just your future self, right? And the impact that you are going to have spreads out like exponentially based on the power that you have chosen or has chosen you, or however you want to look at that. So this is where the philosophy comes in, because you end up reading these people who have had to lead, and they're out way ahead of everybody else. Like there is, they're pulling together texts and trying to figure out like practices and stuff to balance themselves against the needs of the time that they live in and the people that they look after, or however that works, right? Like, or are following them, or are their peers, or however. And so the type of person that you may need to become, like you can have a vision of that person, but the fulfillment of that vision requires like different sort of design systems, right? Some can be rigid, some can be fluid, some can be both, and this is the more adaptable your system is, the more that it tends towards an evolutionary mindset that is evolving itself, the more likely you are to be in a stance where you show up in any place with what you have on you at any time and you're fine, right? Like that's the this is, you know, there's some Marshall things here. You are already ready. You just use the minimum amount of effort to like do the right thing, whatever the right thing is required in that moment. So I don't know. This is that is the sort of ideal that I'm working towards, and that needs to be tied to higher purpose somehow, some transcendent purpose that is beyond the self. Like the self is just an expression of that beyond. And for some people, that's God and spirit and, you know, whatever, or money. And when if it is a finite thing, if it is something on this planet, it will fuck you up because it can never give you the fulfillment of this larger thing. And like, but you can find it together, right? And orienting to the thing and how you orient it. Like we used to have these fixed models of orientation. God is like this, and you mimic God because you are in his image, or his, you know, because the patriarchal stuff. Now, like God is an ever-changing mass of environmental stuff. So how do you rearrange your personas to show up in the world in the appropriate stance that makes sense for the things that need to be done, right? Like this is responsibility. So anyways, I'm reading a lot right now.
Well, one thing that you have talked about, Farzad, is wanting to change I think the scale at which you're operating, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and it seems like, so this is where it might be useful to go back and look at the past. So where have those opportunities come up before? Where have you like grown in scale, right?
Yeah.
And how did you deal with those moments? And what did you learn there? So like as you enter into like your future self is out doing this work, like what kind of like blockers or barriers have you seen in the past and you knew how to get over them? So there's something here, like it's this pattern stuff where, okay, yeah, I've done this before. It might have just been like a simple thing in comparison, but yeah, this is where I think we have like the lessons for living encoded in us, like by this phase when we're this old, not that we're old, but I'm curious if that works. Like, I don't know, I don't have a certainty around this, but it feels like there's something there where there's these lessons from the past that can be brought to the current mindset that help propel us forward. And then that it just keeps running, that there's like a system there, there's an engine there. And if you don't look at the past though, you might be, not you specifically, but if one doesn't look at the past, then you're more likely to just keep doing what you've always done without changing. And this is where the blockages, they're still there, they're the same thing. You're not seeing them, this is blind spots. And this is where people can surround you and be like, what is that? And you're like, what? And then you're like, oh shit, it's been there the whole time and I never thought about it.
Yep.
I'm aware of it. And that's where the insanity comes in. Because I'm very much and this is why I say I keep making things worse for myself just to see how far I can take it.
So
yeah, what?
How can you make it easier on yourself? Maybe that's one
that's
of
the
your
thing that I don't want. That's where I'm not comfortable in. And that's my fear, because
what is interesting one. Yeah.
I work best when my life is not stable. And if everything is stable, I will make a problem somewhere so I can work. And if the work is fine and it's going smoothly, then I try to mess the other thing. I need to have things to think about. And I think because of I guess the time frame where your personality is formed, that was my life.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I got very comfortable with myself figuring out a bunch of new ways of getting out of it. It became
Yep.
a
Yep.
game. So I keep making this game on reset all the time. I've had I see it repeatedly everywhere. Like the agency was scaling up. I'm a whoa, hold on. This is going too well. Let's fuck this up. Let's put some constraints. Let's drop the focus, see if it still works. And if it still worked, and it takes about a year every time we make one of these shifts. And all right, it's working now, but what if we try this now? Um, and I do that on every single level of my life just to make things interesting for myself.
Yep.
And I strongly believe that because everything, the number one, the first thing that people tell me after they've known me for more than a month, like, don't, why you make your life this difficult? Why wouldn't you? It's exciting. And well, of course, there are some moments, like, this is not exciting. This is very, very
You
stressful.
get, yeah.
That's what I was going to ask
I
about.
know
But there
those.
seems like there's something here where you want to change your approach or how you view that.
Also, I have a goal. I'm a very kind of a goal-oriented person, and it's very specific because I spend a lot of time painting that picture mentally, because that's,
Yeah.
for me, I have no belief that holds me to push me go forward. It's just
Yep.
that
Yeah.
future image that I've created for myself, and I hold on to it. But the problem is I have a very specific way of getting into that goal. So
Yeah.
if there is a slight shortcut there, or if there is a new path, I completely disregard it because it's not the perfect way to
Yep.
reach that point. And it can mess up so many things in my life, both work and personal life. With work is, all right, I can end up with this amount of money. But for me, reaching there or getting whatever it is that I want to get is not the point. The how. I'm most proud of telling the how to people than
Yep.
now I have this. And if I'm just a little bit flexible with the how, with the path, my life can instantly become so much easier. But I still don't. And that's the insanity part of it.
Yep. So I have something here. Like I've gone through very similar. Like this is a point in craft and in growing up. We just happen to be craftspeople and business people, and that's been the expression of our life, and the artistry that goes into this. And there's a point though in your progression through these things where the tools that got you there, as clever as they are not suitable to taking you further. And this is fucking terrible because you've gotten them working real well, right? And so I ran up against this when we did this last company, because I'm like, all right, I know how all this works, blah blah blah, and it just all the time it's like, yeah, you can do this. Who cares? Why are you doing this? Why is the point of this? Like, you're not challenging. It's not. So in the case where you blow up your life to make it interesting, which is a valid tool, right? Like, it is, people have they're terrified of this, right? But if you can become blithe at it, you add noise to a system and the system will readapt around reality, right? So that is a tool that's useful for people who have that tendency, including myself. The hardest thing to do, the most interesting thing to do, is to work from stability, to come home, to home yourself, to home in on what is strength, right? From a place of centeredness rather than a place of disruption. Because you can always do the disruption, but can you do the other thing? Can you do the stable thing? Can you build from that place? And what can you build when you can build from there? The things that you can build are so much larger and scarier, and then you have to take responsibility for being firm, right? And then there is an art to firmness, for stability, for all of these kinds of things. And yeah, I don't know, this is the one I'm working on for the same reason. I just set it down. I'm like, stop blowing everything up. I still do it because I'm like, yesterday I made myself sick because I got the scent of
Yeah.
like finding some new pattern in the world, and I overdid it. I'm like,
Yep.
how much can I push this thing? How much new shit can I learn? How much new patterning and balancing act and people can I, all of this stuff. Like you get new spells and you're just like, ah. And then I like blew myself up and I couldn't get out of bed. It's
And I
ridiculous.
didn't see it coming too. Usually
No, because I
I
can
think he's
convince
getting better at
people I'm on the right
hiding
track.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
So like usually it caught like the day before last, I was like, are you moving too fast? Like this was like it got this close like one day. And usually I'm like weeks out where I'm like, what are you doing? And like this time, like he got right up and he's just like, I don't know. No, I think I'm fine. Next day, womp. And I was like, oh, okay.
Crashed. Completely
So I can
crashed.
usually sense into, because there's like a frenzy too. Like, yeah. And it is interesting.
hunting.
It does seem to circle around, oh, things are more stable now. I understand how the world works with this mindset. Like, fuck that. I'm going to go push out and find another mindset that just blows everything up and you have to reorient. Yeah. I mean, this is a way of learning. But you have to, like, if
and
it
this
works,
is that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
If it works and you're taking care of yourself and people around you and like that, like what are the consequences of it, then it's okay. Is it contained? And I do think there are ways to recreate this. If you feel like it's insane in a non-healthy way, there's ways of finding it that are insane in a healthy way. I think this makes sense. Like, I like to do this too. Do something completely different that you've never done before, because I need to like feel like a change in the pattern that I've been sort of steeped in, because it's too familiar. Like I'm not growing. There's no change. Like, yeah. So I don't like stability either. In certain ways I do though. Like I want to be operating from a foundation that feels strong. I'm sabotaging myself less. I used to sabotage all the time with, I mean, drinking, drugs, promiscuity, like just like, I don't know. Sports where you're like rock climbing, things that are like aggressive, where like you're feeling like thrill, basically. Like how can like you rejigger your brain? Like that's not stable. Ride your bike in traffic in Chicago, like aggressively. Like what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, this is so right now I'm like understanding more about what I've been doing, and I had a theoretical understanding of what I've been doing, but now we're tossing all this stuff out, and I'm like, okay, I'm seeing where I'm pushing past my limits, and like I'm justifying that because that has worked for me in the past, right? And along every spectrum of development, mental, physical, spiritual, you can take these tendencies and push yourself, right? And the same results will happen. You'll blow up and you'll have to recover, and like depending on how far you spend your future self, you will have to recover like in the present. So like this is another thing, like taking into account your future self and overspending energy, like
sustainability.
Exactly. Sustainability.
It's like
we're back to that.
The thing, it keeps coming up. How to be sustainable, like in relation to other people, whether it's a romantic relationship, to a group of people, to a company, to the earth. Like I think collectively people on this planet we're faced with that lesson right now, and the pattern is out there, and it's because there's some pressure to it. We can't, I mean, at least with the earth being like the resource sort of like backdrop to everything, we can't keep using the resources in the manner that we have been. So I think people are starting to see that pattern in themselves and relationships too, slowly but surely.
I still don't believe you can push yourself too hard though.
I know you don't.
Well,
no, but what I mean is like there are no limits. I don't think there are any limits. There is something wrong. You can I used to hold this belief very strongly before, that you need to focus on one thing at a time if you want to be very, very good at it.
Sure.
And you should, that's probably the fastest way to kind of move up the ladder in whatever your goal is, that's probably the shortcut, to just focus on one thing, specialize in it. And until I kind of, and I did that for a few years because of the, you finally get the freedom to do so.
Yeah.
Then you realize actually I grow a lot faster when I'm on multiple things at the same time. I pull some things from there. I do some experiments over here, but that can be applied over there. And things start moving at scale, and I'm much more comfortable there. I went through the past few days, just eating very, very unhealthy food and not getting out of the bed. I'm like, I can't take today off. I'm very tired. I'm like sleeping, waking up more tired. Something is off. All right, I'm burned out. But then even that word, I don't understand it. There is something wrong with something that I'm doing, or I'm avoiding something, and then now
Yep.
it's much more noticeable.
So
So
there's
what
like
exactly
balance.
is that? Um, and it's always some sort of a disbelief that
Hmm.
limits you suddenly and scares you, and then suddenly you go into the corner and like, I should slow down because I'm moving too fast. Maybe
Sure.
I'm not who I am, or I'm not capable of doing this at this scale that I think I am. Maybe I should slow down, because it's, I don't know, like the reason that people say don't talk about the work that you are doing too openly, because
Hmm.
sometimes the feedback that you hear is not what you like to hear.
Yeah.
Saying like, wow, really, you're doing too much, and then you're like, nah, this is normal. But then that's already in your head now, because it comes from a place where, all right, this person you trust, so
Yeah.
whatever they think of you, you should be careful now. So you keep hearing it a few times, and you're like, all right, fuck, maybe I am doing too many things, maybe I should slow down. And those maybes suddenly pile up at night, and then the next day you wake up and you're like, oof, I should slow
Yeah.
down.
So
But it's not, it's just, yeah, it's the limitation of other people now put in your head now, which limits you now suddenly.
I think so here's a different model. Like I've been working with this a lot, trying to figure out models that are better suited to the type of work that the person is doing. And in your case, you're doing like heavy duty work at scale, right? And a lot of people aren't comfortable with that because they've never touched it. They're not interested in it. It's terrifying, all these things, right? Myself included. Uh, and so part of this is like if you have a mentality of trauma and hurt and illness, right? Like, how do you react to that? You have to rest and recover and all of these things. And this
Farzad
is
just
where I'm
laughed.
liking, hmm?
Farzad's response to that was laughing.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't
He's
work for
like,
certain
oh,
people.
yeah.
Like, for some people, this is where I'm liking the qigong and the sort of martial arts approach to it. Like, there are blockages. There are like a system in alignment flows, right? So it is moving energies around, right? And it is moving energies to the places that it needs them. And you can learn to work with these energies, but you have to train it, right? And if your training is moving too fast for the type of energy that you are trying to manipulate, it's going to create a blockage because you don't have the skill to do it yet, right? And so you need to be like artistic in your approach to developing skill at a level of mastery, right? Like how you learn the skill. You talked about this. The how is more important, the journey, the process, right? And so the way I look at these, like I got knocked out yesterday because I overtrained. I trained in a foolish way. Like, but I'm only going to know that I trained in a foolish way by blowing myself up or working with somebody who has already trained that way, right? So I let Kristen take care of me yesterday, which is something I'm not good at, right? It like relaxing, like being weak, right? Like she's like, let me feed you. Let me like relax. It's
Not
okay.
actually feed him.
Not like cook food for me and then I can eat it
Yeah.
myself with a spoon. So,
I
but yeah,
just got this
uh,
image and I was like, no, not that.
Yeah, she had a bottle. It was ridiculous. Yeah, anyways, so but in that, like, because that's what my body needed. My body is telling me, like, all right, you tried it,
Slow
you
down.
blew up. Take a
Yep.
fucking day, right? Figure out your next approach to this thing, right? Like, and I recovered. I'm back. And then I had to, like, what I had to do today was say yes to the things that are necessary to do to this. And I don't want to do this. I feel like shit. Like, but I'm being enlivened by moving that stuff through. Like, my energy levels are dropping a little bit now, right? But I can notice this, right? Okay. Like yesterday, I was sick with the idea of like, because in the past I had this mentality of illness, and when you're ill you stop everything and you have to be taken care of in a sort of a smaller way, but being taken care of, letting other people help you, like holding the burden for a little bit, right? Like, because maybe you've overdone it. That's how it works. That's how
Yeah.
we do things together. So like, these models can be healthy or not. Like, are you training the ability to operate with power in a relaxed way, right? In a way that is healthful for you and for those around you. Because the way that you operate with your power is going to imprint itself on the world. And so the people that you're around are going to respond in kind. So I would like people who are willing to take a break and understand where their limits are, and then like work with those limits in the way that you're talking about. You went from a singular focus to a multi-focus because you recognized the limitation of singular focus. And then there's an artistry in bringing into like your quiver the ability to operate with this, and then it only complexifies. And part of the complexifying like act is to use less energy in more appropriate ways. Like, so this is the anyways, this is the mentality. I don't know if that helped at all. Helped me. So
No, it does.
I think bringing personas back makes, like, into the conversation at this point makes sense too, because what strikes me, like, Farzad, like, I agree, like, the sense of limits, like, there's a time scale here, like, depending on what you're shooting for and when you're looking at, like, am I doing too much, right? And what part of you is doing too much? So this is like the personas, where if you're out of balance in some way because some part of you is like ahead of
yeah,
some
yeah,
other part of you, you're gonna feel drained, even though you're like, what the hell, I'm not doing anything, I'm like
yep,
sleeping, and like I'm not. So what, there's something, like, there's parts of self, I think, that get out of balance, and there's developmental levels along these different parts of self where the only way you can level up, if you will, is if they're all sort of floating up together, right? And there are times when you can have one part of self that's really high and one that's really low, and the cognitive dissonance there of operating in
yeah,
the world,
yeah,
it's exhausting because there's some part of you that's been left back, basically. So bringing the whole self, and like growing at the same, I mean, it's not like you have to grow at the same rate, but in order, like Dave was talking about transcendence, in order to like level up, next level transcendence, to sort of leap ahead, you have to bring the whole self. You can't, I mean, I guess you could leave one part behind, but it gets harder and harder over time. This is Ken Wilber and integral theory is
yeah,
sort of what I'm drawing on here. There's like sort of visualization there that he gives for this about a ladder and being sort of strung out on the ladder.
Mm.
Yeah, and like for some people, they'll leave a part behind, like as a child, and it's way down on this rung, and then they get so stretched out because their, current self is way high up, but there's this piece of them, and you kind of have to go get that piece and like help grow it up, grow it up, grow it up, and then
yeah,
once
yeah,
everything's here, yeah, then you can go into the world with this, like what Dave's saying. um yeah, I guess a grounded sort of perspective on who you are in relation to the world, and then what your responsibility is and how to wield power in a way that's probably, I mean, it's more efficient. Like, you're not managing self on all kinds of different levels, you're hopefully right around the same spot for all personas. But I mean, you can't keep it like that always, right? It's going to always.
No, I don't think it's equivalence in developmental level across your personas. Like I think it's just working in harmony in the same way that like a
Yep.
family unit, which
Yep.
or like a team with older and younger people can work with more or less experience. Like it's what they're bringing. Some, like younger people have more energy, older people
Yep.
are better, are wiser, right? This kind of thing. So, yeah. I think we should close it out here because we covered a lot of ground, and yeah, this felt really good. I like this. I think I we gotta work on it, but I think it went well. So I don't know.
I like how the other TV just randomly, I think Netflix is on, but then
Mhm.
suddenly the volume now is up. Until now it was mute and nobody's in that room.
No, no, no,
Godspeed.
no. It's an
It's a
omen.
sign.
Oh yeah, it's a sea conspiracy thing on
Oh,
Netflix.
It's a
it's a
conspiracy thing too.
Conspiracy? I don't know. It
Hmm.
has a rhyme to it. Which kind of shows the current state of the ocean and how the the plastic is basically everywhere now and in the food that we are eating.
Yep.
Makes you
mhm.
want to turn vegetarian even more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. This is
Cool.
this was yet another Thursday.
Mm-hmm. Just one in
I don't even
the
I don't even know what day it is. I'm like, what? It's Thursday.
yeah.
Everything's like blurring together. Yep.
Hmm.
Cool. I don't know. Till next time then. think we should I think we should get this thing up somewhere or like go back and watch it or whatever, however we want to. I'm fine posting whatever. Uh
Yep.
just
I'll
need to
share
figure
it.
out how to do it. Uh yeah, I don't know, and then talk like have our secondhand talk about how we thought it went and like all these things. I don't know. And then see whether or not that like if these discussions are the thing that we're going to continue, like we should continue to do these. I think, I don't know, I like them, but like how the relation to what you're building, like how much transparency in there and all this stuff works, like I'm curious to think on that over the next week. Like, yeah, I don't know, because we didn't get into a lot of specifics on like strategy and these kinds of things, and my instinct is that I don't know. My instinct is that there is some privacy around that stuff because the camera being on. I don't know yet. I don't know with that. We have to think on that. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'm I'm keen to not have any limitation whatsoever or any type of filter. Even this part is going to be on it. Do you know what I mean? Like
Sure,
there's no
I'm
editing,
fine with
there's
that.
no nothing.
Yeah,
And I think probably at the beginning we are a bit more mindful that
hmm.
this is being recorded.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but we just go as we go because I mean we are not making a podcast. We are not making
No,
a thing. This is completely unfiltered. This is how we talk, and we probably can drop in a bunch of um who knows, maybe one day we talk with other people and then we drop it in there
Yeah.
too. I
Yeah.
also midway through the call realized I'm the third wheel.
you're the third wheel. In what way?
No, it feels like that, and I thought that would be a good name for this, but yeah.
Mm, I don't know about that.
Or I'm the third wheel.
We're all the third wheel. That's how it works. Like each of us has expertises and understandings that we can play off of. Like this is the each of our personas has different levels of development, and like yeah, this is we express these things and then we grow together. That's the whole point. So I don't know.
So I've got one meta topic. Um, what were we doing before that changed and that we're not doing now? So there's like the concept of personas, like the artist in the general, like Dave, like your sort of go-to. Whatever we were doing before is different than this style of conversation. So like there's there the equivalent of having like personas as a collective, and what we were doing there, you could call it dialogos after I don't like whoever coined that phrase where it's like a form
John
of
Vervaeke,
dialogue. But there's some like there's the tenor of it, the like style of it. It'd be interesting if you could name these kinds of things. Like what we're doing now is sort of meta.
yeah.
Whatever that one is, like what is the nature of that? Like it's, yeah, is it hunting? Is it exploratory? Like there's something, there's a different sort of feel to it. The energy changes too. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
we're done that. Oh, like,
Yeah.
okay, what was that
Yeah.
then? Is it that we're performing for the camera? I don't think so. I think it's
No.
more of, I mean, where did we start too? Like the tenor of it got started by wanting to look at something in this sort of, yeah, I mean, it's collective. We're entering into a space. Yeah, but what is that?
I mean, there is a, I think my understanding of it, I don't know what the terminology is yet, but yeah, we are entering into a collective dialogue
Yep.
where the individual voices are creating a voice that is the three of us. And that voice that is the three of us has a coherence to it that we need to find and play with and, you know, try different things. And the more, the scarier the thing is in the individual, the more likely that that voice is going to be intelligent, because like somebody put something out that maybe has been like a blockage, and
Sure.
then the collective can then look at that thing. So,
Yep.
you know, it's a type of collective intelligence practice, I think, but I don't know what it's called. Like we have our version of it. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have to have an answer
Conversational
now.
dance. Yeah.
But it's interesting because it feels, it's intense in a way. When you enter into conversation like that, there's a higher amount of energy. I feel like that is because you're like, it necessitates being present. Like I didn't take as many notes because I was like, I can't.
No.
And if we're recording at that, and that means I can go back and get like morsels. I made some notes because certain things like jump out to me where I'm like, oh, this is interesting. But you have to be more present and able to sort of, yeah, be there.
In the it is a performance in the sense that like being on the
Yeah.
field of play,
Yeah.
or being in battle, or doing artistry with somebody else,
Yeah, or like you
or
said, dancing. Yeah.
You can't be thinking about what you're doing, you are doing
No.
it, right?
Yep.
You need to channel as much as you can, like in the moment, because you need to be listening, right? If you are off doing something else, then the resolution drops, the bandwidth drops on the thing. So
Yep.
yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is why when they're recording a movie or they're shooting a movie, however the phrase is, they never start at the beginning of the movie. So actors usually start midway because they are usually intense in the beginning. So when you're watching it, you don't notice it. And I think this is just something that we're gonna get past. But I am just fascinated. Recently, I'm just getting obsessed with the idea of how actually easy it is to get your thoughts out, because that's basically what you want to be known for. None of the work that exists on the internet designs, just how the way that you think is what should make you known for.
The patterns of thought, the style of thought.
That's the personality signature. And this is the only format of doing it, to be completely open. And I don't think it won't do any harm of just sharing basically everything. So, and then the more we do this, we're probably gonna be very good at it in terms of not, all right, now is the time to impress. Or
Yeah, this is I've struggled with this, like similar to what Dave was talking about with the people inviting you to come onto Clubhouse and
Yeah.
build an audience, like do these things. For me, it's different. It's more self-imposed in looking at what my persona is online, because up until I don't know, the last couple of years, I didn't really have a public presence online. Like when Dave and I first met, he's like, I couldn't find any information on you on the internet. So like before going on a date, he's like trying to like figure who the hell are you? And I just wasn't online because it wasn't part of my life. So becoming more aware of that. And then I started a newsletter I was writing because I like to write, but then I just got like, I don't know how to explain it, but why am I doing this? It feels too like, yeah, like I'm trying to play to something or show myself in such a way that it's really hard to do as an individual. And I don't like it. Like I don't want to like
Yep.
package something to share to the world with people. I want to just show them who I am. And
Yeah.
figuring that out, like it's been, yeah, my experience that doing it with other people is the only way to get at this. Otherwise, I get stuck when I'm working alone on this kind of thing. And writing, I mean, talking to yourself, that would be interesting. People do that, I guess. You could share like stream of thought, like here's what's happening with me right now, which is
The
interesting.
better you get at this, the better you get at all of that.
Yep.
Because it's there have to be individual practices that feed the collective practice. They feed on each other. There's an engine there. So
Yeah.
like I mean, doing more conversations like this, finding more players to do these types of conversation, it shows up in your work.
Yep.
Like it definitely shows up in all my writing, like
Yep.
the fluidity of thought and the complexity that you can balance when you are able to be vulnerable in this way allows you to work at much larger scale without any extra effort. So
Yep.
if that's something that's important. Yeah.
Well, you can pivot to different output, right?
Yep.
Like different packaged medias, if you will, of expression that is less censored, maybe is the word, or
Yep.
yeah, more in alignment with who you are, because we're habituating the practice of like channeling and like getting closer to whatever the thought is and sharing it versus
Yeah. Without
making
blockages. Yeah.
yeah, well, bringing something up, well, how do I present this? It's like the same thing of like looking someone up before a meeting.
Yep.
Oh, okay, like I should dress like this. We
Mhm.
do that with our thoughts before speaking oftentimes, like in
Yep. Yep.
meetings specific, like, okay, how should I say this? And it happens in like split second, but this is not that. This is something completely different. Just see what comes out.
We scripted all of this.
We scripted the whole thing.
All
We're
right,
really good
next week,
actors.
everybody get your scripts ready for next week. Good. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
One in the can.
I'll drop it on waste space.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Yeah, we'll figure that out. I don't know how, because I think we should cross-publish these if there's like, because Kristen and I are probably going to do more of these things too. And so like having multiple feeds based on audience, I think is not a bad idea. And yeah, I don't know how to do all that yet, but I think we figure it out. Cool.
I think easiest is just we all do it.
Yeah.
We figure it out later. The branding part
For
of
me.
it.
Yeah, and where to post it and how to post it. Like for
Just
now,
having a place to put
it
a
up.
thing is good.
Yep.
Yep. Cool.
All right.
Bye.
Sleep well.
Yep.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.